This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
Life is often difficult, and the world is a broad place.
We do our best to manage our own battles and try not to get involved in every fight that we're invited to join.
Looking out for number one is a primary goal that is taught to us from a very early age.
What if managing our lives the best way requires reaching out to those in need?
Helping them along their path, using our resources and guidance.
Bearing the weight of some of their burden so they can focus on the fight in front of them.
While contributing to recovery of those in need, you allow space for recovery in yourself.
Your spirits get lifted by knowing that you contributed to the betterment of humanity.
So now two people are healing
instead of just one. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Failace, and welcome to the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's what we do here, and that's the stories that we highlight. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, please comment, and now you can join. Ring the bell so you can get notified of all of our new content, and don't forget to follow us on all social media so you can find out exactly what we're up to. On today's episode, we welcome somebody who I've been waiting to get in here for a really long time, and that's Bill Mazur, to discuss the suffering of others. Bill, thank you so much for coming in.
Appreciate it, man. You guys are doing great stuff, and it's truly an honor to be here. Thank you.
Well, I mean, we're all about mental health and everything, and you're right up our alley, so this is going to be a lot of fun.
The funny thing is your story, you had 25 years or however long you did on the job, and it doesn't even scratch the surface of the stuff you're doing now. Before we get into anything, let's throw a big shout out to our marquee sponsor, and that's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody, but we do trust them, so if you're looking for a car, go to toyotahackensack.com. Now, Bill, each week we grab a question from our audience. This was a real easy one. This was a no-brainer for me. It says, it's from Rotterdam 50. So I'm assuming it's a cop. Why do you help others? This seems to be a profession that's well fitted for you, but there's got to be a reason behind it. Nobody just wakes up one day and says, you know what, I want to help others. There's got to be a backstory.
I think it's really about mission and purpose, right? There's this great book out there called The Why Cafe. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's a short read. If any of your listeners are looking for a good short book, it's a good one. They talk about a PFE. PFE stands for purpose for existing. And when you get a taste of being a helping professional like you were as police officers, like I was, there's something special about that. And then when you get into a profession like this, where people are coming to you in their darkest hour and they're looking for guidance, and you can provide them with a resource, or their family with a resource, that's right there. There's no higher gratification you could have, in my opinion anyway, than helping somebody in that particular kind of scenario. So it's purpose, it's mission, it's purpose for existing.
One of the things I talk about in the beginning is how, we're taught from a very early age, you got to look out for number one. You got to look out for number one.
And don't step in number two.
But in reality, is it really working that way? Where if you give and you take what you've learned throughout your life and you give to others and help them along their journey, maybe that's the way. I don't know.
You do have to pay attention to self-care. You have to pay attention to regulating your own emotional state, because you couldn't be the best version of you, this is not like a fairy tale kind of, guru kind of thing. It's real, in my opinion, because if you aren't taking care of self, and there's a lot of facets to that. It's physical self-care, it's emotional self-care, it's nutrition, it's all these things. If you're not paying attention to that, and no one's perfect at it, by the way, but if you're not paying attention to it, your fuse will burn out quickly.
How many times we had this conversation about first responders generally don't take care of themselves.
No, they're the worst at it.
You got a lot of heavy set people, and they're out there trying to help others. How could you help someone else if you're not mentally and physically helping yourself?
Well, think about one of the first things they taught us in the police academy. It's when you're responding to a call, you're no good to anybody if you don't get there safely.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And that's the concept. Mike, what do you think?
Well, you know what? I mean, being around sports our whole lives, we've always had people that helped us. Coaches help you along. Your parents always help you along. It's almost a way of giving back to all the people that helped you at some point in your life. And we would have never got here on our own. if we didn't have people that helped us. So to me, it's really just an idea of giving back to the people that helped us.
Helping people is it's got so many different facets to it, but its basic core is it's good for your soul. It really is good for your soul. When Mike walked into therapy, I had been gone from my shooting for a year, and Mike walked into therapy. I saw him, and I knew Mike, but I didn't know him. And I remember looking at him, and we connected. We just started talking. I gave him my phone. He gave me my phone number. I was like, all right, let's talk. And we did talk, and I found something that I felt better. All right, I still wasn't okay, but I felt better that I was able to give what I learned through my experiences to somebody else. And I thought a lot about this question today. And listen, I got a little advantage over both of you. I've seen this question already, so I had some time to think about it. And I came to this conclusion that I have this belief inside my head, as misguided as it might sound, that if I save enough people, then maybe I'll be able to save myself. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's how I feel, because I am not, by far, I'm not a perfect person. Just ask my wife. She'll tell you right now, I'm definitely not. But I feel this internal need to go out and just save people. I don't know if that's what drew me to be a cop or not.
You just feel it's an easier way of getting to heaven.
Listen, I'll hedge my bet on that one anytime I can. So Rotterdam 5.0, that was a good one. Thank you so much for sending that in. Keep sending in your questions, and we will try to get them on the air.
We could have had a whole show just on that.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is why Billy is so important to come in here, because
Absolutely.
The core of our show is to help people to overcome adversity, to overcome suffering, to run towards the prairie fire. And it is right up your alley. We reconnected. So we were at a Blue Magazine event. Let me give it a little backstory for everybody. We're at a Blue Magazine event, and I still have some friends that are police officers in South Jersey. And when Josh Vidal was shot in the head, I followed that story very closely. Josh is a wonderful person with probably the most messed up sense of humor I've ever heard in my life, but I love him dearly, and I love his resiliency on it. So immediately when I walked into the place, I recognized Josh. No, the big scar on his head.
It's a dead giveaway.
It's a dead giveaway. But I recognized him. And then you're standing right next to him. I remember right where we were. We were at the Brownstone. And we start talking, and we realized that you and I have all the same friends. We know all the same people. We went to the same high school together. We didn't know each other in high school. I knew who you were, but you were older than me, and you're not going to pay attention to a piece of dirt freshman. You weren't. It's life. But you and I remember, talked most of the night.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what's Pat Applegate doing? What's Brian Pierce doing? It was so nice. And I went home, and I remember talking to my wife going, you're never going to believe this. This is the most fortuitous meeting I've ever had in my life. And it was cool. It was really cool.
No coincidences, right? Not in this business.
No.
When something like that happens, we say, of course. Of course it was supposed to happen like that, right?
I believe you're putting us in a place for a reason, or put in a position for a reason. You know, and maybe it was a chance meeting, but maybe it was meant to be.
Yeah.
And, oddly enough, we had a guy who went to St. Augustine Prep, where both two people I know traded Holy Spirit for St. Augustine Prep to go coach there, two Holy Spirit guys, and I'm going to say their names just in case they do listen. It's Mark Reardon and Charlie Roman. But we're starting to get a little South Jersey action in here. I love it. That means Philly fans. That means
Are you an Eagles fan too?
Flyers
Of
fans.
course. Of course.
Yeah. I'll be down there. I'll be in Citizens Bank on September 10th.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, that's right.
Did he have money?
No, they got their own court downstairs. We're good.
Mark and Charlie, by the way, were two incredible athletes, and they basically had fire hydrants for heads. I mean, they could hit like a ton of bricks. So that's a compliment.
Mark Reardon playing middle linebacker. And listen, Mark used to be over my house all summer playing wiffle ball. Like Mark went to Lafayette, and then he coached. So he was
Villanova.
He coached. He went to Villanova.
He coached at Villanova.
He coached at Villanova. That's what it was. He went to Lafayette, coached at Villanova, and then got the head job at St. Augustine. And then Charlie got the head job at Holy Spirit, and then went over to St. Augustine because there was some, I don't know what it is. I don't follow the politics down there. But you grew up in Atlantic City?
Correct.
Yeah, where did you grow up?
So a little bit more towards Ventnor. I know you know where that is, next town over. You know,
It was just
Beach-
a knife and fork.
Yeah, there you go. Beach Town, next town adjacent to that kind of borders, Atlantic City. They call it Lower Chelsea now. But yeah, grew up there. My family's roots go back. I mean, gosh, this is worth mentioning. Over 100 years on both sides. There's a street named after my grandmother in Atlantic City.
And that's before Atlantic City was Atlantic City.
Oh, yeah.
That was
You're
before the
talking back
casinos and all that.
Yeah. You're talking, early 1900s. There's that history. My father, 100% Ukrainian. He grew up in the inlet, like last street in Atlantic City, Main Avenue.
Well, the inlet's not the inlet no more.
I know.
Gardner's Basin. Let's call it Gardner's Basin
yeah,
now. So.
Yeah, but right around there. So that was sort of the like Ukrainian Polish area. And then my mother was, an Italian. She grew up around St. Michael's, Texas Avenue, Florida Avenue, around there. So, yeah. So there's a street between Texas and Bellevue. Bellevue's kind of like a smaller, like half street, and so it's Texas and Bellevue, and there's alleys that go in between there, and they were all like little row homes. It was formerly Camerata Terrace, and now it's Ann Bunting Lane. That's my grandmother, my mom's mom.
I know exactly where that is.
Yeah.
Because I
Right
heard.
across from Star of the Sea.
Yeah, well, I heard Angeloni. I was just down there. Angeloni's is closing. It's one of my favorite Italian restaurants, and I know exactly where that is.
Yeah.
Walk right past it.
So that's sort of the history there. And born and raised there, youngest of 6 kids. Come from a blue collar family. I think I mentioned this to you before. My father did 40 years on the job in Atlantic City.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, 40 years on the job. My brother was on the job as well too. So my whole family, 6 kids, like I said, sort of the typical Brady bunch, 3 boys, 3 girls kind of deal. I'm the youngest. And we all went into some sort of public service. So my oldest brother and I went into law enforcement. I have 2 sisters that were nurses, a brother who's an orthopedic surgeon, and another sister who was a teacher. So we all went into some sort of helping profession, if
You're
you
like
would.
the Marzaks.
Yeah. Great family.
Great family. So Marzaks, remember I told you Joe Paterno came to my high school to recruit somebody? It was Pete. Pete was my age. But all the kids were ultra successful. Joe is a Superior Court judge. Stosh is the preeminent hand surgeon.
Stosh went to medical school with my brother. He's good friends with him. I'm friends with Joe. I went to school with Ann. Ann was in my class. They're great people.
They are good people.
Yeah.
And the old man was a coach at Holy Spirit High School forever. But you have strong ties to that community.
Yeah.
But back in the day, what year did you get hired by Atlantic City?
92.
92. So back in the day, I remember in the 80s, Atlantic City was one of the higher paying departments in the area. And you got a job. You were set pretty well with Atlantic City PD, but you had to know somebody to get in. Obviously, you fit right in.
Yeah.
Did your dad push you into it, or is this something that you just wanted to do?
No. I always identified with like the good guys, seeing my dad, come home in a 3/4 length leather jacket with a nightstick. I mean, it was back, those days, come home with his buddies who were cycle cops with
The old drop down holsters.
Yeah. I mean, we identified with the good guys. So that always sort of, I idolized that, growing up as a kid. But truthfully, when I went into college, my early sort of, intentions were to graduate, get my bachelor's degree, and apply to the bureau, the FBI, and maybe even law school. That was like sort of the path that I was looking at. I even thought about like going into the military because like special forces, I read a book when I was in high school. I don't know if you ever heard of it, Point Man. It's about Navy SEALs. It's, it's one of those classic books. So I was having these thoughts of doing something like that, to really challenge myself or whatever. I graduated from Holy Spirit, went to Temple University. I was there for my freshman and sophomore year. And my sophomore summer, a bunch of my friends, people that I knew, said the police test was coming up in Atlantic City and they were going to take it. And they were like, man, you should just take it. And I was like, I'm going to do the college thing and then, see what happens after that. And they were like, man, you got to take the test. And then my brother decided to take the test as well. And so I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to take the test. And I told my parents. They weren't angry, but they were like, why are you doing that? You need to stay in school. Because everyone, education was a priority in our family.
In 92, it was a big deal. You had to.
Yeah.
Or in the late 80s, early 90s, you had to go to college.
But in 92, you didn't need a college degree to get into law enforcement.
Oh, Just a high school degree, actually.
Well, if you were anything like me, I never had aspirations to become a police officer. I sort of was in the right place at the right time, like we talked about earlier. And it sounds like that's kind of, this opportunity presented itself to you, and you don't turn down opportunities.
Exactly. So, long story short, took the test. I did well on it. I scored in the top 20. And I think at that time, 600 or 700 people took the test. Like Kevin said, I mean, you wanted to get on the job there because there's, it was great pay. It was a larger department, a lot of lateral movement. You could do cool stuff. There was a lot of things to do in the agency. And
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. After my shooting, I was lost. Inside my head was pure chaos, and I really needed help.
You find yourself having trouble sleeping. You have trouble concentrating. You have trouble going through the normal daily routines because you don't know what's going on in your head.
It turns out one of the best ways to quiet your head is to talk it out.
And therapy is a great way to do that. You can clear your mind. You can talk to people who know what's going on, and you can really get all those negative thoughts out of your head.
Mike and I both wouldn't be here without therapy.
There's a lot of benefits to therapy, too. You get to talk to people who have gone through similar situations that you're going through, and it helps get all of those demons off of your chest.
Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you want to switch therapists at any time, there's no additional cost. Get a break from your thoughts with BetterHelp. Go to betterhelp.com/suffering and get 10% off your first month.
That's betterhelp.com/suffering.
And so, a lot of people want to get on the job. Anyhow, I took the test. I did really well, and there was like a hiring blitz. They were ready to hire like that. They sent us a letter after the results came out, which were immediate. Hey, we're starting background investigations, and I'm like,
wow, this is real.
Yeah, this was the summer going into junior year. So now I'm like, what do I do here, right? So my friend's like, you're crazy if you don't take this job. People are killing to get in this agency, and there were so many, cool things and opportunities you had.
In 92, I mean, Atlantic City was booming. You had the Taj was being built. It was probably done construction in 92.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
It was somewhere around.
Because I remember a lot of, it put a lot of my friends' parents out of business. Because they weren't getting paid on it and stuff like that.
Wasn't there one house in Atlantic City where the person wouldn't sell and they built a casino right around the house?
Oh, yeah, it was right around the corner from my grandmother's house. Yeah, she knew her.
It was on Pacific Avenue, right? Yeah, so.
I remember that story, but I didn't know if it was a true story or not.
Oh, it's true.
Yeah, I don't know whether, it's not still there, right?
No.
They got rid of it?
Yeah,
they finally offered enough money. It just sold.
But I remember, obviously some of the guys we went to high school with, all their parents either worked in Atlantic City or they were union workers in Atlantic City or cops in Atlantic City. And I used to hear the stories coming out of there, but a lot of iron workers. And some of the iron worker stories were pretty brutal.
And the casinos were paying really well. So in the early days, right before I came on, like in the 80s and stuff, casino gaming came in like the 70, 78 or 79.
77,
77
resorts, yeah.
Yeah, you're right, 77. They were paying really well. I mean, what a dealer was making back then was probably double what a cop was making. There's actually several people who left the police department and went and worked in the casinos. Some of them came back, but others just left the profession and went and worked because that was a lot of money. I mean, making six figures in the 80s, that's a big number. So by the time 92 came around, I got on the job and I saw the opportunity and I had at that point I had a pretty clear vision of what I wanted to do. I wanted to do street crimes, narcotics, eventually SWAT, that kind of stuff, the high speed stuff. And so I decided to stay. And
what did you get put into first out of the police academy?
Patrol. Yeah. You go right into your FTO, your field training. And, back then it wasn't really it was not like a bona fide program. Where
they didn't have like a bona fide like FTO program. You drove with one of the older guys.
In 01, it wasn't even in my department.
If you're lucky to get an aggressive older guy, it was a good FTO program. If you got one of the old dinosaurs,
I was very lucky. I got some of the best cops in the department. That, when you're that young and you're impressionable. I mean, I went at 20 years old, graduated at 21. When you're that impressionable, and you get exposed to like guys who really, just incredible on the street. They know the people, they know the environment, they know, they just sniff it out.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty intense in Atlantic City. The FTO consisted of basically you had to do all three shifts, which was Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie, which was day, evenings, 4 to 12, and then 12 to 8 overnights. And it's a different environment. It's in Atlantic City. It's weird. The day shift, there's a higher volume of calls, but they tend to be less serious, if you will.
Absolutely.
4 to 12 was a busy one.
Whether it be parking complaints, blocked driveways.
And I will bet you 4 to 12 was your favorite.
Oh, of course. That's
Because I was 3 to 11. That was our shift, and that was my favorite. But my FTO listened to nothing but jazz music and turned the heat way up and expected me to stay. I think he did it on purpose.
Expect
Me to stay awake.
Yeah.
He's like, come on, man. It's 90 degrees in this car, and you're listening to Chuck Mangione. Come on. It was god awful. But back then, I remember the conversation because I could overhear it. Is he ready? Yeah, he's good. Okay. You're no longer on FTO.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you made it through jazz and 90 degrees in a car.
Oh, it was awful.
You ready to go?
I think on my it was my first week. I don't know, maybe it was my second or third night. I was in a foot pursuit.
Yeah.
I mean, you're there a week, and this is what it's like. Go get him.
So do you remember your first serious call? It was sort of like a wake-up call. You get out, and you're very idealistic when you get out of the academy. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to do this. But then you have your first real serious call. Was that it?
Well, I guess, that was the first real adrenaline dump
Yeah.
that I had, that I was like, whoa, like,
Where you get back in the car and it's like, oh,
I'm a uniformed police officer. I'm in really good shape at this point. 21-year-old. I was, a competitive power lifter at that time. I just came out of the academy. I mean,
you're
what
good.
you can do at 21 years old, right? So it was sheer joy on some level, but there's a little bit of terror involved in it, right? Because you're getting an adrenaline dump, and you don't realize it until afterwards. Like I was a uniformed police officer with a gun telling this guy to stop, and he's not stopping. He's running, and he's reaching for his waistband. 3 days into the job. It doesn't dawn on you until after. I don't even think it dawned on me until I went home that night. I was, I grew up doing martial arts, so adrenaline dump was not foreign to me. However, in that context, that was an eye opener.
Well, we talk about it all the time. People say, like, were you ever scared when this happened? It's like, you didn't have time to be scared. You just reacted. You did what you got to do. And when you got back to the car, or like you said, when you got home, it was like, holy shit, what just happened?
Yeah.
Mine was real simple. It was a robbery out of a Best Buy, and we caught him up on 280. It was my second day on FTO, my second day. And it was back in the days when glove boxes used to magically open. We all know those days. And the glove box magically opens. Now, there's a difference between, I worked in Essex County, which was a little looser at the time, and the robbery happened in Morris County. I'll never forget the detective for the neighboring agency. The glove box magically opens, and he goes, "You did this stuff in Morris County, young man. Say in Essex County, you're going away for a long time." And that's exactly what he said. I'll never forget. I could still tell you the name of the detective who said it. But that was my wake-up call. I'm like, wait a minute. Like my first shift on the road, there was a DOA. And, that is what it is. But this was like, okay, now this is serious. This is serious.
Mine was when I started off at the sheriff's department. I'm out on the road. I think I'm in the process division serving papers or whatever. And they give out a description of a car, and they let a cop on a pursuit and everything. And I'm sitting right by the highway, and all of a sudden, whoop, there goes the car. I'm like, here it is.
Yeah.
Chase his car all the way onto Route 80 into Patterson. And I'm like, I wound up losing a car. I got the plate and everything, lost the car. We wound up making an arrest later, but it was some scary shit when you're doing 90 miles an hour in and out of traffic.
Calling out 70 miles an hour, too.
Yeah.
So you've probably had some opportunity, especially with such a large department, to have that lateral, like you said, the lateral mobility. Any one detail stick out to you that you were assigned to?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so from 96 to about 2000, I was assigned to the County Narcotics Task Force. So I spent 4 years detached from the department. They wanted young faces to do UC work. Me and another guy from ACPD were detailed out there. And that was a real education. I mean, from 93 to 96, 3 straight years on a busy shift in patrol, you certainly see a lot. You start to understand what the streets are and how to navigate them and how to deal with people. You're still a young guy at this point. But then I got this opportunity because they were looking, and we we historically had a good relationship with the prosecutor's office. We would detail guys to major crimes, the narcotics task force. So I had the good fortune of, a person or two were rotating out, and me and another young guy from my class were rotated in. And we didn't know how long it was going to be. It was going to be like a quasi, short-lived thing, maybe like 6 months to a year if things went well. And we wound up being there over 4 years. Things went extremely well, and I got an incredible education on the drug culture, which I thought I knew as a young guy.
Yeah.
I had no idea. It was just amazing. I just could not believe how prevalent the use and sales of drugs were. I mean, and it.
Come on, man. You went to Holy Spirit. You saw it there.
Yeah.
I know you saw it there.
Well, I'm saying it knows no socioeconomic boundaries.
No.
I mean, you're talking about,
High-level
connected
people. Yeah.
wealthy people, right down to the street level and everything in between. And, I happen to have a couple of good informants at the time, people that I knew from the street. Man, I got to see some incredible stuff and learn from some great people at the prosecutor's office. Back then we had, these were old time kind of narcotics guys. And so we got to go all over, went all over the county. We did UC stuff in other counties, other states. We got to work with the feds on a lot of cases. So those 4 years were, that put me, I would say, and this is no knock on the department, but by virtue of the assignment and the people I got to work with and the things I got to see, it put me lightheaded, light years ahead.
Put you on a different
fast
level.
Track, of my
Absolutely.
comprehension. Not that I was any better or any smarter than anybody, just the exposure that I had to things like, I knew how to write, a consensual, to wire somebody up. I knew how to write an affidavit. I wrote them all the time for search warrants. And so, you don't typically get to do those things when you're, just a street cop.
Joe
You get the vice
Patrolman.
guy. Yeah. So I got that education. I learned from some of the best. And I went in there not really knowing how to, shouldn't say not knowing, but I was not, very particularly, schooled on writing intricate reports and how to build probable cause on another level. I'm not talking about street stuff. I'm talking about, deep connection of dots. I learned it there, and it actually became a very strong point of mine later in my career because of that learning experience.
Now, you're somebody with so close ties to the community. You went to a regional high school pulling from people of all different towns and stuff. I know we've all run into a point where you've had to lock up somebody somebody who you had a relationship with early on in your life or went to high school with, and you lock them up and they're like, "Hey, Bill, how you doing?"
Dated back in school.
Yeah, it's happened. And that feeling of, I got to do my job. Did you ever come across that?
Yeah, I did. It was drug stuff, unfortunately.
Well, believe it or not, in wealthier, like I don't want to say the wealthier, but people who went to Holy Spirit were of a different economic range than say somebody, maybe most of the people that might went to Pleasantville or Atlantic City or somewhere like that. And people, believe it or not, there's money to buy the drugs, and the drugs were there. We all knew where they were. Mm-hmm. But so I know a lot of parents sent their kids to Holy Spirit to get them away from stuff, but it turns out it's everywhere.
Yeah, it is. And going back to that time, like 96 to 2000, we worked in a lot of the bars, and that was when the scene for like ecstasy and MDMA was blowing up.
Yeah.
It just came, like the club kids and all that sort of scene. That was wow.
And that's like the rich man's drug. That's like not like the little kids, the little corner kids or anything. This is affluent, kids of affluent people who have access to the money.
It was. In a lot of cases, it was. Yeah. And we had a couple pretty big cases with that, couple huge seizures of MDMA, ecstasy, ketamine at that time. But you nailed it. Yeah, sometimes you're doing these investigations and names pop up and you're like,
Jesus Christ.
I got that for 20 years. But, there's a line drawn.
You got to separate.
Yeah.
They go their way, you go your way, but it still affects you when you go home. How did you deal with it? Because you're seeing everything at such a rapid pace in your career. How did you go home and decompress? Was it your ride home? Were you still living in Atlantic City? Mm-hmm. So, that ride home for Mike and I was a big deal. Mm-hmm. Well, not Mike, because he lived 10 minutes away from the police department.
I've walked home.
Yeah.
My decompression time was walking home.
But that 15 minutes, from the time I left the department to the time I got home, was a big deal for me.
Yeah.
I needed it.
Look, I'll be very honest with you. At that time, I was a young man, and I didn't have the know-how, the skills, the knowledge on how to do that. But what I did have, and I didn't know this until I reflected back on it, was, a good foundation of family and sports and fitness and martial arts and taking care of myself. And like I said, it's not like I consciously said to myself when I was a 20-something-year-old, hey, I'm going to do these things so I can balance out, the trauma and the stress of what's going on in the job. Honestly, it wasn't really a thought. I just did it. Reflecting back, it's 100% why I was able to function after doing that.
I always say the gym saved a lot of lives.
Yeah.
Because that was your aggression release. That was, go there, whether, like for me, it was running. Mm-hmm. I'd go out there and run and it would just clear my head and I'd be fine the next day.
But you saw it around you, though.
Yeah.
Because not everybody was as fortunate as you to have that strong foundation. A lot of those foundations that were around you were built on sand. And you saw some people destroy themselves.
Yeah.
I know you did.
On the regular, actually. Yeah. And again, going back to, I at that time, how much emotional intelligence do you have? How much life experience do you have as a young 20-something-year-old? You think you do. But, comparatively to my 52-year-old self now, it's a couple drops of common sense. But, yeah, I mean, it's
well, you see somebody getting jammed up, and you as a young man, because I know I'm very guilty of this. This is what I did. Oh, this guy's what a jerk! What an idiot! He ruined his life. He ruined his career. Nobody ever asked why.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's where I was going with it. You beat me to the punch.
Oh,
Right?
I'm sorry about
that.
No.
Well, yeah, you're on
We
my
could just
channel,
end it
man.
right now then.
We're on the same channel. I think back in the day, it wasn't talked about. It was like the scarlet letter A. You knew who the guys were that were, and I use this term sort of loosely with air quotes, functional alcoholics, right? I knew plenty of those that I work with. Actually, some of them were some of the best cops I've ever seen at work, most of the time. In their personal lives, they were disasters a lot of time. But you knew those guys, and you saw them, and
Oh, he's okay. He's good at work. He's okay. Yeah. He's all right.
Yeah.
But we've also, and I won't mention names, but we spoke about this. I remember when I was a kid, one of my friend's parents lost their job in your department because they got caught with something they weren't supposed to get caught with. And I remember thinking in my head, cops do that stuff? I was that young where I go, you mean cops are, like, I didn't understand the concept of a dirty cop.
Yeah.
But there was a reason behind it.
Yeah. There's a good saying, a good buddy of mine, Dr. Lou Schlosser. I don't know if you know. Yeah, Dr. Schlosser. He's one of the most well-known police psychologists. I mean, not only in New Jersey, but in the United States. He uses this phrase, and I use it all the time. I have to give him credit for it, though. Risky behavior, undesirable behavior is often a sign of unwellness, right? So, but back then, like you just said, you're like, this guy's jacked up, man. Yeah. What's going on here?
So you're telling me riding a wheelie on a Harley down the Parkway in the Absecon area, somebody might have done this, or jumping out of an airplane or stealing from pre-construction houses. That's risky behavior?
Correct.
Got it.
Yeah, like taking...
it could be viewed.
Check.
It could be viewed.
Taking hot tubs.
Taking hot tubs. in a place somewhere in Galloway.
And then getting mad when someone stole your hot tub that you stole.
Correct. But yeah, but that all, and listen, a lot of things you're saying, I'm speaking not to down the person that got caught, because I did live that life for a very, very long time. And it's taken me twice as long to try to get out of it, and that's why, I'm interested. When did you start noticing the mental health being something around as something that needed to be focused on within the department while you were still active? Because I know you matriculated through your department.
Oh yeah. Well, I started to see, those guys and girls really who, were the functioning alcoholics, and they had, in their personal lives, you're talking 2-3 marriages, just completely broke. Not in a good space in their personal life. And you look at them and you think, man, what's going on there? But again, it was not something that you went out of your lane, so to speak, and went up to somebody and said, hey, you okay?
It's their life.
Exactly. Mind your own business kind of deal, right? Don't be a rat. It's none of your business.
And like you said,
worry about yourself.
Before, as long as they're okay in work,
Yeah.
Do you really care about I don't want to say you don't care what's going on in their social life, but
And you don't want to piss people off. You don't want to
overstep your boundaries.
Overstep your boundaries, exactly. So, but I definitely noticed things going on, and a couple of people who I cared about. And then, there's been a number of suicides in Atlantic City PD. There was upwards of about a dozen during my 25 years there.
There was a rash of them not that long ago. There
Yeah.
was a rash.
Yeah. So I knew every single one of those people. 3 of them were, guys I would consider like brothers to me that I knew very well, that I worked with, and I knew something was wrong.
Well, did you ever get that survivor's guilt? Because I know this has happened to me. I'm not sure about Mike, where you lose somebody along the way to a suicide. And man, if I just would have opened my damn mouth and just said, just checked on him, just made a phone call or say, hey, let's go get something to eat. Let's go get a cup of coffee, something. Did that ever come across when you started losing these guys?
Of course. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. I mean, it's hard not to, right? And you think man, why didn't the department see something? And I'm not throwing a dart at the PD. I mean, this was a blind spot in the profession. Right?
This is a culture.
It's a culture. Yeah. I'm not blaming the police department. We didn't have the knowledge that we do now. It's not an excuse, by the way. It's not an out for them. That's when I started to see it and started to think hey, man, we've really got to start taking care of ourselves and ask people if they're okay. And this is at the time where I started to get promoted. Eventually, came into upper ranks, mid-level management, lieutenant, captain, and there's only so much you can do as a sergeant, right? I mean, you're still, I still wanted to be one of the guys. I was still out on the street. I had some really great opportunities. I became the youngest commander of the street crimes unit. I was a young sergeant, and I was still in that mode. And then one of the guys in the unit actually died by suicide in my unit. So that was a devastating loss to all of us. And
I love the fact that you don't say commit.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah,
we had our vocabulary changed, Mike and I, by somebody who lost their son to suicide, and like everybody else, I accidentally said, "Hey, he committed suicide." Like, no, and he was very respectful, and he did it in such a way, but he was direct. He said, "No, it's not commit. It's lost."
Yeah. Well, language matters, right? And that's what people say, and it's true. So that was devastating to everybody in the unit, and we were all asking ourselves why, because when I tell you, I mean, this was the quintessential. Nobody had a clue. Nobody.
Probably like Joe Cop that.
Oh, this guy. Yeah. I mean,
just Joe. He just exuded cop.
He was the star of the unit, and we had 12 guys who were all superstars. He was a megastar. That's how, how it was back then. But so there's a lot of questions of why and what could we have done, and we still talk about it to this day, to be honest. But so that was certainly one, and there was a couple of others. One guy I went to the academy with. He was not a member of the PD. He was a member of another agency. And so those were things that really started to change my thought process on wellness, certainly for myself, and then for the folks that I worked with, and that I got to supervise, got promoted to lieutenant and captain. And this started to really become something that mattered to me. And
now you have the power actually to change policy.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Now I had a little bit more influence on decision making. But, there's always, until you're the top dog, you always have somebody over you who may not see it the same way you do. So, we started to enhance things. We started to we built a state-of-the-art gym. I thought it was really important to start with that physical part, then to start coming out and talking about mental wellness and stuff, because it still was not part of the operational vernacular, right? Well, it wasn't part of the language.
You got to backdoor it. And so that's my language, because that's what I tried to do. My gym was there was one Nautilus machine. That was it. And it was in the break room where everybody ate lunch. So there was no physical fitness. Nobody put any, because I believe, as Mike believes, is if your body is sound, it helps your mind. It's not going to make your mind 100% clear, but at least it helps.
Sure.
So that's a step in the right direction. And that's all you want to do is move forward.
Right. I wanted to try to restore some camaraderie in the department too. So, we endeavored on this project. I was the project manager, and I went to the PBA and I said, "Hey man, look, here it's probably going to cost us, upwards of around 100,000. And I know that, we can't ask for 100,000 from the PBA, right? We could get a significant amount, but because you're a nonprofit, we can go out and fundraise. We can ask people to donate. So I said, look, I'm so serious about this. Here's all I'm going to ask from you, that you guys match whatever I raise. They took a vote on it, and it was almost unanimous, the whole body. Believe it or not, there were a couple of people that said, well, what do we need a gym for?
Yeah, exactly.
And my response was, if you're asking that question, there's a lot of more things that you need to look inward, about yourself. Anyway, I raised about $40,000, and the PBA, to their credit, they matched it. So we had about 80,000 and change that we had, and then we had some other donations. It wound up being a little over 100 grand, but we were able to get like what they call government pricing, GSA, and we got everything for cost. So we built a gym that probably would have cost $250,000 in ACPD, all brand new equipment. And, that was an attempt to raise awareness around, your physical health, to impact your mental health, and to restore some camaraderie, to make everybody feel comfortable in there. As much as I was a meathead myself, powerlifting, and I loved lifting since I was a kid. I didn't want it to be like that, where a bunch of iron was thrown around. Yeah, you could do that, but I wanted everybody to feel comfortable. So we had cardio, we had machines, we had a good mix of stuff. And to this day, it's very impactful in the organization, and it's something I'm pretty proud of. So that's where we started with that, and we started to move towards doing some other stuff. And it was more about paying attention to the traumatic events that occur, especially the shootings, because we had a string of officer-involved shootings. My last, I want to say 5 or 6 years on the job. I mean, there was at least one per year or a couple per year. When I saw officer-involved shootings, we shot and killed, half a dozen people in that time frame. They were all 100% justified and legal, proper uses of force, thank God. But I also saw the fallout from those things, where we lost some really good people that left because, it was a burden that they carried, taking a life. So
believe me, I know. I mean, you feel like you're a burden to everybody. You feel like you're a burden to your department. You feel like you're a burden to your family.
Because all of a sudden you wake up one day and you don't recognize yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were textbook shootings. That just goes to show you, and for the public to understand, whoever is non-law enforcement, listen to this. Even when it's 100% justified, legal, proper use of deadly force, there are still inherent things, your humanity, that makes it unnormal or not normal, abnormal, is that the word, to take the life of somebody else. Even a person who is threatening your life. It's a difficult thing.
We're not signing on to this job to be criminals. I remember it was right before I got on, there was a shooting in my town, and the suspect was killed, and I knew the guy. And I remember asking him, I was like, yeah, but it was a good shoot. I remember just telling him, yeah, but it was a good shoot. And he goes, but you don't understand. I took somebody's life. And the guy was a bad guy. I mean, he was probably the best car thief in weapons, drugs, gang member, like hit all the marks. But he goes, you don't understand. I took somebody's life. Never, ever did I forget those words coming out of his mouth.
I still wrestle with that every day. This guy, whether bad guy or not, in my incident, he had family that loved him. He had family that thought he was a salt of the earth guy. And, he was a provider for the family. His method of providing might not have coincided with, our plan in law enforcement. But he still had people that loved him, and he's never going to go home again. And I take that to bed with me every night.
Yeah. Training can prepare you for a lot. I don't know that it ever prepares you
for the aftermath.
Yeah,
exactly.
They don't make a bulletproof vest for your mind.
That's right. I mean, you can train, obviously, your draw, the speed, get, coming on target, your breath, everything.
Grab your front sight.
Yeah, of course, all these things, right? And certainly training helps with that. But, taking a life is not a normal thing for the human brain to process, let's face it. And you don't need to be a scientist or a psychologist to understand that. And so that's kind of what led me into that path.
It's part of the reason that we study serial killers, and serial killers' lives are so fascinating to us. I'm guilty of it. You watch a documentary about Kuklinski or something. As a matter of fact, the guy who prosecuted Kuklinski lived in the town I worked in, and he used to walk at 2:00 in the morning. His name's Bobby Carroll.
That's the
And
Iceman, right?
That's the Iceman.
Yeah.
His name's Bobby Carroll, and he used to walk with another guy named Paul Smith, who was also involved in that investigation, worked for the state police. I used to stop them and just, I was like almost a fanboy, just grilling them, because I'm trying to understand how somebody can kill so cold and so heartlessly and get through it. And they would tell me all the details that you don't see on TV, and that was a really big eye opener for me. But it was a fascinating, and it's kind of the reason why people are fascinated. It's the point I'm trying to get to. Now
What's a fascination of the unknown?
Yeah,
Because you don't know what they're thinking. So now you're fascinated with the hell is going through this guy's mind.
so you make it up to deputy chief, okay, and it's time to pull the plug.
Mm-hmm.
You've done all this great work. That gets to most people, where this job that you loved for 25 years, 30 years, however long you did, is over. You go into work one day and then you never go back to work again.
Mm-hmm.
How did you deal with that?
Yeah. Full disclosure, I did, the end of my career was not the way I had envisioned it or planned it. I knew this, I was not going to be a lifer in the PD. I always had this thought in my head, because these guys, you've worked with them. I never wanted people to say, what's Mazur still doing around here? Taking up space, taking up a promotion for somebody else. I never wanted to be that guy. I always wanted to be productive when I was there. So I was not going to be a lifer, but I did. And by the way, people who know me know this. My intention was never to be chief. Quite honest, it was not to be deputy chief. That was not what I was focused on.
And that's the exact reason why you would never be chief.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
You deal with a lot of police departments. You know people that shouldn't be chief, and they get it.
Yeah. I mean, the promotional thing started for me when, I had a long talk with my dad and a mentor of mine, and you see some of the folks around that were able to make rank, and you shake your head, right? There were others who were fantastic, who were like, walked on water, but there were others that you just shake your head. So I said, well, at least I'll get to, I'll take this test, see what happens, Sergeant, and I could then make some impact on the good cops. And I got promoted. I scored well on the test, and then when I was at Sergeant, I had a great time. It was probably the best position you ever have, because you're still quasi one of the guys. You can go out and do police work, but you also have this ability to be able to lead people and find your own style of leadership. But then I saw the same thing at the next rank, and I was like, some of these people should not be wearing that bar. So I took the test for lieutenant, and I scored number 1 on the test. And let me tell you this first. Let me backtrack. I'm not a good test taker. I'm not one of these just independently super intelligent people that can just walk in. Yeah, I work my ass off. Honestly, I made a lot of sacrifices. I studied.
You take all those courses back in the day?
Oh, absolutely. And you spend a lot of money. Yeah. You spend time away from your family. And I remember typically, we talk about it still, I spent a lot of summers away from my family because they would be at the beach and I'd be studying. So, I worked hard to get those spots. And with civil service, that's the one thing that you can do. You can study hard for the test and pass the test, hopefully. So anyway, got to lieutenant, and I just sort of, saw, hey, I can make more of an impact. But I wasn't chasing a promotion. I wanted better for my family, certainly more financial gain out of it, of course, but I wanted to be able to impact. I really wanted to and I didn't get off on telling people what to do. It wasn't like, oh, I wanted to be the boss. I can honestly look both of you in the eyes and say that never occurred to me. That was never my intent. I wanted to be able to impact the department. And, and I undertook a lot of projects and things that other people did not want to do in the agency. Not because I wanted to be like a super pleaser or anything like that, or, be in somebody's good graces. I was actually the opposite of that. I pissed a lot of people off, to be quite honest, because I had my opinions, but I took on a lot of things because when I was coming up in there as a patrolman and stuff, I looked at those things and I said, this policy or this process sucks. And
this could be fixed.
This could be fixed. And somebody's got to have the cojones to do it, or the effort, or the intention. And I said, what good am I if I complained all these years about this, this, and this? I get to a point where I can actually make impact, and then I fall in line with everybody else. I'm not going to do it. So I sort of became that guy.
But do you realize you took a job where you're trying to protect people who don't know how to protect themselves, can't protect themselves, or are looking for help. You took that job. So within your own police department, this is what I say about my police department. I always spoke up for things that I didn't disagree with, to the detriment of my career. Okay, let's be very honest with that.
Oh, yeah.
That's why it was chief's test, which was even worse. But I said, what kind of hypocrite would I be if I didn't speak up for things that were going wrong in my own department that I have the ability to change? So it's a natural progression. And if the people that don't like it, well, those were the people that shouldn't be in those positions.
Agreed.
Exactly. They were the people that you said you were looking at. You have some good supervisors and some bad supervisors. The bad supervisors were what I used to call the conformists. They just went along with the program. They got their sergeant stripes.
They're in every agency.
Or they got their bar, or they got their captain bars, and they just kept going along with the program, and shit never gets fixed.
Mm-hmm. My father, and again, my mentor, one of my mentors, a guy by the name of Will Glass, who's a legend in the PD. He was a phenomenal canine officer. He
Wasn't Steve's father, was it?
No,
Okay.
no relation. He was, he's a bit of a legend. He's a legendary canine officer, SWAT team guy. He was a cop's cop. Image, in shape, treated people right. I mean, he was just the epitome of a professional.
He was a Goals magazine guy.
Yeah,
totally. and just treated people right. Truthfully, if he would have been our chief going back when he had the opportunity, the department probably would have taken a much different route, to be honest. And I'm not throwing darts at anybody else. I'm just saying that guy's superstar. So, and I think people who know him would agree 100% with what I'm saying. Anyway, he told me, as did my father, that you'll find that most people in the department at some point will probably compromise themselves to get what they want.
Without doubt.
Wow, that is profound.
It is. It is. It stuck with me forever. And I'm not necessarily saying compromise themselves like in a dirty way, criminal way, maybe unethical, sure.
They'll say yes to something they shouldn't say yes to, usually.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And it could just be to get, a better assignment or weekends off or a take-home car. I saw that, and it started to really become, when somebody points something out to you and then that's all you can see, like, hey, or you say, I want to get a red pickup truck. I really like a red, and then that's all you see is red pickup trucks. Well, when I became attuned to sort of that personality and some of the culture, which is dysfunctional, not everybody was like that. There's a good portion of people who would do that. You can't help but see it everywhere, and you just have to look around. I'm not saying I was perfect and that I did everything perfect, but I did not compromise myself to do those kind of things, and I stick to that today.
That's the tuning fork of law enforcement.
Yeah.
So when you're doing your tuning forks on your radar to make sure it's good, when you ding it, happens to everybody, you will just focus on that tone. Mm-hmm. You'll just it's in something in you, something about that tone, and that's the tuning fork of law enforcement. Mm-hmm. So you focused on what you saw, but you hit that tuning fork, and that's all you see.
It's a good analogy. Listen, you said it earlier. It's a much harder road to travel to not comply. Now, look, I'm not saying that you should, be a nonconformist and fight everyone and everything. It's not what I'm saying. But you have to have principles. You have to have a personal code of honor that no one's going to bend. You're not going to allow anybody to, because then you don't have a personal code of honor.
Exactly.
That's why it's called that. PCH, that's what we call it today. And you got to have some principles. And, to my detriment, I had a tendency to stick to my guns. And I did this when I really felt passionate about a topic, or I knew my facts. And I knew what I was talking about. If I didn't, to this day, I won't speak up. I mean, I'll sit back and learn more before I say something. But if I know what I'm saying is factual and I have the receipts for it, so to speak, I will not acquiesce in an argument. That's just how I am. And not just to argue for argument's sake. That's not what I'm talking about. Or just like to be a nonconformist. That's not what I'm pushing. But again, you have to have principles, because at the end of the day, I don't regret any of it. Maybe some of the battles I fought then, I probably might do a little bit differently. I wouldn't say I wouldn't fight the battle. Maybe I do it a little bit differently, maybe a little more strategically. But I
Diplomatically.
yeah, that's the word. But I look back and I'm proud of sticking to my guns on these things, and I can look back and I can honestly say that I didn't know anybody any favors.
See, you know what though? There's some people out there that buck the system just for the sake of bucking the system.
Right.
Well, they're the problem identifiers. They're like, this is a problem. Well, no, you can't do that. You're like, that's a problem, but here's my suggestion how to fix it. It might not be right, but at least he's offering up a little bit of assistance.
But now if you come up with a proper solution to that, then I'll say, oh, you're a company guy.
But you're a dangerous man because of the way you approach that.
And because he's smart.
Correct. You're a dangerous, dangerous man. A lot. I'm not going to say all because I know a lot of good police chiefs and a lot of good administrators. They want guys like you around because it elevates them. It makes them better. You're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. But there are some who get threatened by a guy like you. You're a bright, intelligent guy who likes to work and is a problem solver. Very, very. No wonder. No wonder you may have had a problem or two.
Because people feel threatened.
Correct.
See, like I said, I've said it a million times in the show.
That you're threatened by me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I gave you the spam dial today. I was fortunate enough to have, to me, what was the greatest police chief ever. Open door policy. If you had something, if you had a question, you just call him up on his cell. Chief, can I come see you for a minute? Come. I see problem A, B, and C. He's like, you know what? You're right. Because he could listen to the street guys and take their advice and not feel threatened by anybody.
Where you have somebody like me who just used big words around my chief just to watch him get red because I knew he had no idea what I was saying. But again, to the detriment of my career because I'm sitting there trying to poke the bear because I want change. I want change. That's why I got involved in unions and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, here's the other thing too. I mentioned my age. I was young. So I got promoted to these various ranks and I was the youngest guy at every rank. Now I had some peers who were older than me, who were very accepting. They loved me. They respected my father. They knew my father. But by this time, my father had retired. He retired in 2000. So he was retired. I wasn't like I was there with my dad. And my brother had actually pensioned out too on a medical. So I was the lone survivor, so to speak. But, you know, I definitely had peers who were great guys, but I also had some who I absolutely know that, you know, they took the stance of like, you know, settle down, kid. Kind of, you know, when you come up with an idea and, you know, I respected that to a degree, but I was like, you know, there was a couple times where, you know, I said, listen, I respect you've been around here for a while, but you have 2 bars and so do I. So, you know, where do you want to go with this? So that happened a couple times. Not all the time, but a couple times. And if they were listening to this, they would know who they are. But I did have one extremely, I mean, just, you know, probably the greatest mentor, you know, that I could have had. Will Glass, who I mentioned earlier. He was, you know, when I came on the job, he was my sergeant. He was one, you know, that quintessential, that sergeant out there, like chasing cars. I mean, you know, he looked out for the workers. He was, you know, making arrests, you know, foot pursuits, I mean, you name it. And he was, I mean, gosh, he was probably in his late 40s at that time, you know.
Handlebar mustache? Because all you guys had handlebar mustache.
He had a thick, manly mustache. Will did, yes, and
70s porn mustache.
Good-looking guy, in shape. You know, martial artist. I mean, he had it all, right? So, and then you know, he sort of took me under his wing, so to speak, and he was my supervisor. You know, in various moments, or you know, throughout my career, and on the SWAT team. He was the commander of the SWAT team. I mean, he was out there doing what we were doing, and he, you know, I mean, he had to be in his, gosh, I want to say, you know, his 50s at this time. You know, in shape, just a super guy. He eventually retired as a deputy chief. He sort of got pushed out too. We had many character traits in common. He pushed the envelope. He was a principled man. He was a doer, and he didn't have time for people who didn't. So if you were one of those guys, you might not have a favorable opinion of him because you're threatened by him. But if you were a worker and a cop, he walked on water. He didn't act like that, but for a lot of us, he did. So he wound up retiring. He came back as the public safety director. And I mean, he could have chose anybody that came in to work in his office, and he chose me to be the executive officer. So I got an opportunity to work for him at a high level as a captain of police, and he oversaw police, fire, EMS, emergency management, beach patrol. So I had all those things myself. At one time, it was about, I want to say around 750 employees that he was responsible for, and I was the executive officer. So everything that went through that office passed through my hands. So you can imagine, as a young captain now, not that people of higher rank were answering to me, because they weren't, but things had to come through the office, through my hands. And I respected that. I never used that, even perceived authority to push it on to somebody else, especially someone of equal or greater rank. It just wasn't part of my personality. But I know that some people felt
you had a
threatened
voice.
by that.
You had a voice now. You have a voice to enact changes that you saw throughout your career. And that's what makes the end of your career such a difficult thing, because now you're finally at that level that you've always wanted to get to, where you can enact that change that you want. You can change, you can make the place a better world for the people coming up through the ranks. And now it's time to retire.
Yeah. Yeah, it was so
Finally get there, and the rug's pulled out from under you.
Yeah, I mean, so what happened with that was it was a blessing in disguise. I mean, it was not the way I had envisioned going out. Truth be told, and this is full transparency, I have nothing to hide. The city was in financial dire straits, so to speak. And there was a lot of reasons why that was. I mean, the casino industry, the downturn of the economy, competition in the casino industry. They had a bunch of tax appeals. I don't know if you guys know the history of this. And that crushed the city's coffers. So the state came in, state of New Jersey, and sort of, they took over. The government, and they were making all kinds of changes. They were basically trying to turn us into a metro police department, and they did succeed in some respects. And what they wanted to do was, I can say this stuff candidly now. I don't work there. They were, a big part of it was financial motivation, right? To clean up some of the books, which I get that. But we didn't like the way they went about it, because they forced out a lot of good people at the end. And it was a situation where you had to retire. I mean, they they did things, cutting our salaries and our benefits and stuff, ripping up our contracts that they knew were not right to do to people. Long story short, we appealed it and won it. So it's water under the bridge, but it was not a good experience to go through. And they were basically able to turn over the books. They pushed out, there were 13 of us left in my class, my original class of, 30 something, 13 of us, and all 13 of us retired, on, the 25th day, or the 25th year, the last day of the 25th year. So, or the day that we could, November 1st, essentially. And a lot of, that was higher salaries that went out. I get that, but the way they did it was not good.
But you're losing a lot of administration at that point, too.
Oh yeah. There was a lot of experience.
Yeah.
A lot of administration. And, so, I will tell you this. I did plan for my exit, in that I pursued higher education. I was lucky enough to be chosen and accepted and went to the FBI National Academy. So I had a pretty large network of people, and not just in the law enforcement, but in the business world, from being around and being an Atlantic City resident and having, knowing people. So I was planning, and I looked around, and I leaned on my mentor, Will Glass, and a couple other people to really sort of make a plan where, what do I need to do to succeed on the other side? And, I started doing, I was teaching.
You're a young man.
Yeah, 46 years old. So I was teaching. I had written articles for, some pretty big, publications, and got my name out there. And it's about networking, truthfully. So at that time, before I retired, I am, this is not a brag. I'm just, saying I did have several opportunities. They didn't fall in my lap. I worked for them. I put myself in a position to get them. I had several opportunities, and this one by far was the most appealing. What I'm doing now, working for Acadia Healthcare.
But see, the NA is a big networking thing anyway. You were cops from all across the country, all around the world, right?
Oh yeah, that's where I just came from. I was in Nashville at the Tennessee, Kentucky FBI and AA chapter training, which they have a combined chapter, and I got invited to speak there and be a sponsor, and so we get to do cool things like that. And I saw two of my classmates. This is 2014. Yeah. Saw two guys I hadn't seen in years. And it's like you pick up right where you left off. So that was a pretty cool thing too.
But it's funny, you had this amazing career. And by the way, I do want to say, before I go any further, the amount of people, you talk about networking, the amount of people that you know and who know you is astonishing, I speak about my therapist, and I go in there and I'm sitting in there and you call me as I'm sitting in session. My phone goes off and I look down and she goes, "Who's that?" And she sees it and she goes, "Oh, I know him. He gave me the fern." I'm like, "What? What the hell is this? Like, what's going on?" And Amanda Coleman,
Of course.
In the Irish, I'm not even going to try to butcher the Irish brogue, but I love Billy.
Yeah.
I love Billy. It's amazing how many people you know. And I always say that if you're a police officer for 25 years and you don't connect with a group of people outside of the police department, you're really wasting your career, because one day this job ends and now you're looking for something else to do. But I will say this about you. Through your networking, what you did in the police department is important, but what you're doing now, this is your calling.
Your
brother.
niche.
Oh, yeah.
This is what I know personally from. We get people reaching out to us. I'm going to give full disclosure to our audience. We get people reaching out to us who just pretty much want to talk, but they're in some bad ways. Mm-hmm. And now through knowing you, and Amanda's another great resource, I have a resource where you might not be able to help them, but it could be a starting point. Because before, it's just like you and me talking, "Hey, it's not that bad. It's going to get better. The sun's going to rise tomorrow." It's a little different.
I mean, part of that is I have a big family, and I have people in public service. They know the name, right? It's kind of a well-known name around. But, I also, again, from my father and from Will Glass and a couple others, I learned the power of networking the right way. I never sought out to be a popular guy or to have everybody like me. You're not going to accomplish that. I think that's the wrong intention there. Networking, and this was explained to me, and I'll pass this on because it's worked very well for me, and I didn't invent it, so I'm happy to share this. Networking is about when you shake hands with somebody and you look them in the eyes and you say, "Hey, call me if you ever need anything." I'm not making small talk. I mean it, right?
That's you hit the nail on the head. It's not how you doing, and if you tell me, that's freaking rude. It's I want to know how you're doing.
Absolutely.
If you need me, call me.
Yeah. And I will say those words. I'm not making small talk. Reach out. And I've told this to the guys who I've mentored, especially in the police department. The greatest networking opportunity I ever had was going to the NA. I mean, you're talking about international outreach at this point, right? And these relationships last forever in a lot of cases. But here's the other thing. When someone calls you, and I think I grew up with this, be a man of your word. When someone calls you, you better answer the phone on the first or second ring if possible. And if you can't, it better be for a good reason.
Especially if you need anything, give me a call.
Right.
And now they're calling you and you don't answer.
Exactly. So when they call, answer the phone and do everything in your power to immediately drop what you're doing, unless there's an emergency there, and tell them that, and do the best you can to assist them. And that's worked for me very well. And I'm going to tell you why. Because you quickly become the go-to guy for a lot of folks. And you also become somebody that people can trust, that you're going to do the right thing and you're going to do what you say, right? So I was taught that, and I held on to that tightly. And I still hold on to it tightly today, and I try to do the best I can to instill this in my children too. And I think I have. So it's not just about shaking hands. Hey, how you doing? Give your business cards out. That's not networking, man. It's shaking people's hands, really getting to know them, being there for folks, dropping everything that you're doing to help someone, not because you might need a favor one day, but I can tell you this: I've had to use some favors here and there, and I got stuff done really quick. And it wasn't even for me; it was a favor for someone else. And Did
you ever get stuffed though? I mean, you give, and sometimes people don't reciprocate. I ran into this, and it was actually somebody from group. He was one of these guys. Hey, call me if you ever need me. He called. I'm that guy. He called me. I'm good at construction. So he needed something installed. I go down to his house, which was like an hour and 15 minutes away. I go down there, I put in a door, and we had a couple new guys coming into our group therapy session, and I wanted the older guys there for some experience. So I called everybody up, and I said, hey, listen, could you do me a favor? Just come to group. We got new guys coming in. I need the experience. I want the experience there to show that you can get through this stuff. You can beat it. Nothing. And I got a little mad. I'm going to be honest with you. I got a little mad. I didn't lash out. It got back to him that I might have said something to the doctor, and it got back to him. He calls me up. He says, I hear you're a little mad at me. I was like, yeah, well, all I'd ask you to do is just show up. Just be there for somebody else to repay what you were given. And his thing was, ask me anything else. Ask me any other favor. And I said, I don't ask a second favor when the first is denied. I learned that from The Godfather, so I didn't make that one up. I don't ask a second favor when the first one's denied. You're just off my radar. You're not a guy I can trust who does what they say they're going to do. So have you ever been stuff like that?
There's none that really stand out. I'm sure there's been a couple.
And that's not if they're not capable of doing it. If they're not capable, like, you help somebody out, hey, can I borrow $10,000? It's not like that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, there's been many disappointments along the way. So the answer to that very precisely is yes, that's happened, but it doesn't deter me. I mean, again, your personal code of honor. What is it? So the other side of that has served me well. So I continue to try to do that the best I can is be dependable to people. And now with this job, I mean, you have no choice. I mean, you have to be dependable.
Tell everybody what you do at Acadia.
So I'm part of a team of about 80 folks that are spread across every geographical region of the United States, called the Treatment Placement Specialist Team. It
is the marquee mental health entity in the United States from my research that I've seen.
I would agree with that. Well, look,
I'm not being biased, but I'll agree.
Well, here's what I will say. Acadia is the largest behavioral health care company in the U.S. At one time, when I first came on, they were the largest behavioral health care company provider in the world at that time. I mean, there was like 44,000 employees when I got hired in 2017. I mean, they treat 75,000 plus people a day in their network. So, I mean, it's gigantic. They owned, I want to say 590 facilities internationally in the U.S., the U.K., and Puerto Rico. But they have since reorganized some of the assets and sold off many, if not all, of the stuff in the U.K. so to refocus on what they're doing in the U.S. But they're gigantic. Their outreach is, I mean, it's just nobody can compete with the outreach because of what they can do. But so I work for the operations team of Acadia. Sorry if this is a long explanation, but I want the viewers to understand, or the listeners and viewers.
Take your time.
So I work for the operations division. So even though they own about 300 facilities, including psychiatric hospitals, residential treatment centers, I mean, they even have methadone clinics, they detox, et cetera. I don't work for any of the facilities. We're sort of like an offshoot of the parent company in that we're like the operations division of a department. We were formed. And they, by the way, they came up with the name Treatment Placement Specialist. And if you look at it, it's a little trademark after they trademarked the name and the actual definition of the role. And essentially what it is a in-kind service, a free of charge service that helps anyone navigate the behavioral health care landscape. So anybody could pick up the phone, go on the map, go on the website, and look somebody up who's in your region, call them and say, this is a problem I have. This is an issue that I'm dealing with. I'm looking for, entry level, a trauma therapist, a grief counselor. Check. We do that all day long. I'm looking for, outpatient, intensive outpatient, IOP. Yeah, roger that. We got that. Residential treatment, acute stabilization. So it's anywhere on the spectrum, and they do it as a free service. Now people go, free service? How do they do it for free? Well, what we do is free. We are primarily an insurance-centric model, meaning most people that call us, the vast majority of them, have some kind of either private or commercial insurance. And when a person seeks treatment, their insurance reimburses the facility. Now, of course, Acadia is a for-profit company, so we would like to place them in an Acadia facility if possible, if the clinical, appropriateness is there, if the insurance works, the financials, the geography. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this decision. Yeah, we'd love to put them in a KD facility because we have just a vast array of things that we can address. However, what allows us to really do the job, I think, very ethically is we don't have an obligation to send to an Acadia facility. So we use facilities outside of the network that Acadia does not own. They do not make one singular cent on it. And if that's the best fit for the client, for insurance, clinical, financials, geography, et cetera, we have no problem connecting you to a facility outside the network that we have vetted, that we know your insurance works at, and we're okay giving you this resource, and you can go. You can go to that resource.
Your
That's
dividends,
amazing.
your dividends on the back end will pay off tenfold. But your particular expertise is public safety or first responder liaison or public safety?
Public safety liaison.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Now that's, see, for mental health, if people, usually first responders have decent insurance. Okay. So it's a win-win. First responders are in the most need of mental health, in my opinion, and they have great insurance. It's a win-win for
As they should.
both ways, because with that financing, you can get them into the proper treatment. And I know people who you've sent to facilities and they come back such better people because they could function inside this world. So like I said, the work that you did in the police department, ultra important, great job. You did a wonderful thing. But that was like the training period for what your life's all about.
You know, but this is touching on a subject where departments don't want to hear. You know, mental health and mental wellness has been like pushed under the rug for years because nobody ever wanted to, we talk about this all the time. Nobody ever wants to admit that they're having some mental health issues in law enforcement or in the fire. You're going to be labeled
Blackballed.
You're not going to get that extra assignment you want.
Thought less of.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's such a great thing that you guys are doing.
That was something that I struggled with personally because I know when I pensioned out, a lot of people called me some really awful names. You know, we've heard it. Oh, you hit the lottery. Yeah.
Come live my lottery.
It's a lack of awareness.
Yeah.
And I don't get mad at folks. You know, I just understand that they're uneducated when it comes to trauma.
I don't anymore. At the time, I was too deep in the midst of it. I did get a little mad. I never lashed out. Thankfully, I never lashed out. They never got a phone call. They're just, again, I choose to associate people that are good for my own well-being. Let's put it that way. And what you're doing right now, what does it do on the back end when you send somebody to a facility and they get treatment and they call you up? Because this has just happened. I know this just happened because it happened to me. They call you up and say, "Hey, I'm back. Thank you so much." And that's all you want, right?
Man, listen, I wish I could pull my phone up and run through some text messages that I receive. It's what drives us to do this. I mean, and the funny part is that you get a lot out of it when you see these outcomes. But the truth is, I mean, I tell everybody the same thing. I don't want to say a speech, but I have sort of a template in my head of my experience, and it sounds something like this. I will connect you with the best clinical resources that we can find you. I will set the table for you. But brother or sister, you have to do the work. I can bring you there, I can get you there, but you have to open your mind, you have to open your heart, you have to lean into it, you got to get after it, you got to use some of the skills that probably made you a good cop, some of the type A personality, let go of this stuff, because the return on investment is like 10x.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Right? You can't go there and go through the motions. I would say you're not ready, man, if you think that you're going to do that. You're not ready. So that's and I wanted to say too, so real quick, just to kind of further clarify. So within that treatment placement specialist team of about 80 folks that are all over, we have so many subspecialties, which is super cool. I mean, we have eating disorder experts. We have another guy that works with us who just does higher education. So he only works with, they call them emerging adults. We call them young adults, but in this business, it's called emerging. The 18 to 26 sort of demographic, college students. And he just works with college students, getting them into treatment, making sure they aren't charged for classes and how to matriculate, back into the fold of things. Like, does a phenomenal job. But what we do, my partner and I, who I should mention, my brother, Joe Collins, who's a retired chief of police.
I've spoken with Joe.
Joe's an awesome guy. I mean, he's just my brother from another mother. You know, we always say we're sort of half kidding, but mostly serious. We think we share a brain sometimes because we it's like we're a couple. We finish each other's sentences. We're just on the same wavelength with this stuff. So, but you know, Joe, so Joe and I share almost identical pedigree in terms of our background. I mean, law enforcement experience. Went to the NA. We were involved in SWAT. Just very, very similar. And by the way, we see this sort of, you know, this realm of mental health, addiction, trauma exactly the same way. So Joe and I are we have the subspecialty in law enforcement and first responders. I mean, we have a combined 65 years of experience. So we've kind of seen just about
everything.
Just about. And you know, so it's incredible. I mean, I couldn't do this job by myself. The volume's just too big, and I wouldn't be as effective by myself. I mean, it'd just be overload. That's why we brought Joe on too. He was actually working with Acadia doing some consulting stuff when I first came on, and we just clicked right away. And so I have, one of my best pals as my teammate now, and we work on everything together. You know, I talk to him, no kidding, probably 10 times a day, every day. So even on weekends. And this is the stuff we talk about.
Does Acadia have hair growth specialists?
Shut up. You know, it's funny though. You said before, I'll set the table for you. It's like, I'll set the table, but you have to eat the food.
Well, that goes.
Right? And that's really what it comes down to is you're going to set it up for them, but they got to take the next step.
That goes on down the line with everything. You can apply that mantra to everything. Mike just did it for my son. You know, he opened the door for my son. It's my son's job to walk through that door. You know, we can't push him through the door. We can't make him walk through the door. He's got to walk through on his own, and it's the same thing here.
Well, like I said, I just set the table, and he's got to eat the food now.
That's 100%.
Another analogy that I use all the time with folks is, look, you came to me and you said you wanted to get in shape, and I said, all right, cool. I got a trainer for you. I got your gym membership. Even have a person who will design your diet. It's all there. Guess what? Mike ain't getting in shape unless Mike does it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's true.
You could join a gym. It's not going to get you in shape. Right. You have to go to the gym.
Right. You got to put the effort in.
So we're coming to the end of this thing here. And I don't even know how to fashion this part of the podcast. You've seen so much. From what you do now to your police career to how you tried to make a difference, which is all you're still doing that. You're still doing the same thing that your mission that you set out for in the police department, which is to change things that you saw were broken. But you've seen a lot of suffering. And if you don't learn from your suffering, then it's really a wasted opportunity. So what do you think your suffering of all this stuff has taught you?
Education on trauma, perspective. When you understand what trauma can and will do to somebody, their brain, how it'll drive their behavior, you start to have a different perspective. And that's why I say, like, the resilience curriculum and learning about trauma, not just the resiliency, but learning what trauma does to the brain, but also the neuroplasticity of the brain, that you could learn new stuff, right? Create new neural pathways, different ways of thinking. When you start to learn about trauma and what it does and the self-harm patterns, I mean, all the stuff that it can create, you start to gain a different perspective on people. And that's why I think it's such an important thing for young police officers to understand what trauma does to the brain, the body, the behavior, right? Because it is not, I say this all the time, I'll qualify my statements by saying it's not an excuse for anybody to harm themselves or others, to do bad things to other humans. It's not an excuse. It's not a free pass. It's perspective. You can look at people who are doing bad things and you can say to yourself, I wonder what happened to them, right? I wonder, what drove that person into the current state that they're
What's
in.
the underlying condition?
Of course.
Yeah.
There's
absolutely.
there's always something beneath. There's always some context. I mean, the substance use issue, a lot of times is symptomatic of the trauma, unaddressed trauma, unresolved trauma. So there's just so much. I think the trauma piece has just been such an eye-opener for me. And we're so lucky. We get to work with some really bright people and doctors, and we get training and education. So I am much more educated on this than I ever was. And it's really helped me understand people a lot more. And I'm absolutely wholeheartedly convinced police officers need this. They need this education.
You're taking when police officers in general, that's what I'm going to speak on because that's what I know, and I know it's broader than that, but we're going through something and we don't understand it, and that's what drives people to do the unthinkable, because you don't understand it. But through education, just like you said, now all of a sudden you have an understanding of, okay, I know this is why this stuff's happened. Doesn't make it easier, but what it does is make you understand it. Okay, if I understand it, and when I understood it, I know that this helps. So now you have a pathway to go. At least you have a jumping off point. And that's what you do. And I can't thank you enough for coming in here.
Listen, man, I think we probably have a lot more to talk about. I sense there's going to be a part two, because I told you I'm a self-proclaimed nerd when it comes to this. I will talk about it for hours and never run out of things to say, because it interests me, and we have a passion for it. So,
but you were supposed to come up here with Josh, but unfortunately, you're one of these guys who says their family's more important. Like, geez,
I think it was a basketball game.
Yeah,
I can't mess the kids' basketball.
No, I'm with you on that one. But thank you so much, Bill.
Bill, you're doing great things, man. Nice. Keep it up. It's important.
I wish this could go on all night. I really do, but unfortunately, we got to wrap it up. Thanks for coming in so much. And listen, you're family now. You're always welcome in here. You have something that you want us to get out. We can be a conduit in order to get that out in the world. Because if we can do with this show a minuscule amount of the good that you're doing, we win.
Well, listen, I appreciate it. Thanks for highlighting what we're doing. I mean, again, I can honestly say there's a lot of people that went into my development. I still have a lot more development to incur, but I did not get here by accident. There's a lot of people helping me, a lot of good mentors. I mentioned some of them, certainly my family, and and I've been given incredible opportunities by Acadia to do this work. So I do want to acknowledge that portion of it, because this is like. Sometimes I have to pinch myself, honestly, even though it is emotional work. It's draining sometimes, right? And there's ways to manage that, which I do. It's tremendous that we get to do this. It really is. I mean, you mentioned earlier, I think you said something to the effect of, and you nailed it. You said, being a cop in law enforcement was tremendous, but doesn't compare to this. And you're absolutely right. I say it all the time, and that's not a shot at that.
Not at all.
Listen, I couldn't do this job if I didn't do 25 years on the job in that community, Atlantic City, and see the things that I saw. It gives me credibility and credentials, so to speak, to talk about the things I talk, because I was there. I saw a lot of it, either first person or through vicarious means, seeing other people suffer. So I know what it looks like. And now I've worked with Acadia for about 6 years, and I've done thousands of referrals with my counterpart, Joe. So we have a large volume, a large reference to go from, because we see these things every day. We see the fact patterns, first responders, public safety, suffering. And I can tell you 100% without any hesitation, you could take the fact pattern of what some of these folks are going through and you could place it anywhere. It could be in Seattle, it could be Texas, Florida, Maine, anywhere in between. It's eerily the same. Why? Because of the continuity of the experience. Everybody's going through the same stuff. That's what's happening. So anyway, that was a little wordy, but that's why we do this. That's what keeps us so energized. The outcomes. I know we just had one, between us, with a guy that you referred to me who's doing tremendous right now.
Yep. I spoke with him the other day. He's living his best life right now, and he's so grateful for the opportunity in order to get better. Yeah. But in order to wrap this up, you said earlier on you didn't know what you didn't know when you were earlier. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, and it's a Socratic theory. It's the wise man knows that he knows nothing. Just think about what we're going to learn in the future. Mm-hmm. You know a lot now, but there's more to learn.
It sure is, man.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you,
the future's not too late, though. We got to help these people while they need the help now.
Sure.
We're going to learn a lot in the future.
Yeah.
That's going to do it for this episode of The Suffering Podcast, The Suffering of Others, with our very special guest, Bill Mazur. And let's think about all the stuff that we learned. There's a purpose for existing, the PFE. Police work is dangerous, but so is telling your parents that you're dropping out of college. Did you ever ask why? PCH, Personal Code of Honor. Be a man of your word. You have to lean into it, but most importantly, Billy is a man who would do anything for you. But just to prove that point, when Billy walked in this studio, he gave me this Atlantic City Police Department patch that he ripped off of his shoulder. So he didn't just give me a patch, he gave me his patch, and I'm going to hold it forever.
And you can see the white behind it, too, so you know he was deputy chief back then.
My white shirt, man.
And that's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast. Don't forget, you can now join our subscription channel. Follow us on all social media. That's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Clapper, LinkedIn, all the... don't even say it. Don't even say it. Don't even say it. Follow Mike at Mike_Failace. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. And follow the Suffering Podcast. We're going to see you on the next episode.